back to Candid Conversations. How are you doing today, Candice?
I am doing well. Chris, we have a full table today.
We do. We have two guests today, and they are related to our IT Leaders Workshop that we're a part of.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what is IT Leaders Workshop?
Yeah, so the IT Leadership Workshop is a program we run here on campus. We run it every year. It's a 3-month leadership development program for IT and IT adjacent leaders on campus. It's been around for about 15 years. We've put several hundred people through the program. It's 25 people each year. They come in, they do a 3-month intensive leadership development program. It's all run by folks like us. You and I are
IT
facilitators on
yes.
that. How long have you been part of the program, Candice?
I can't even fathom. I don't remember.
Yeah, it's been quite a few years. We've both been doing it for quite a few years. I think this is my 11th year in the program. And it's just an amazing way for us to sort of pay it forward and kind of teach the next generation of leaders. And so today, we have two of our ITLW graduates from last year, our 2025 cohort. We have Jen Anderson and Lauren Gray. And so we'd love to start off with the two of you introducing yourselves. So Jen, do you want to start?
Sure. Jen Anderson. I'm Assistant Director of IT at the School of Information Sciences here on campus, and I have been on campus for over 20 years. I've been around for a little while.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Excellent.
All right. Hello, I'm Lauren Gray. I'm a data analyst, decision support, and strategy lead in Gies College of Business, and I've been in this role for about 3.5 years.
Okay, great.
Wonderful.
We're so glad the two of you joined us today.
Awesome. Chris, let's start off with some questions, okay?
Okay, you want to take the first one?
Awesome.
Yeah.
So what were you doing before ITLW, which we affectionately call it, and how did you see yourself as a leader at that point?
So before ITLW, I was mainly focused on completing projects and supporting my client groups. And then at that point, I kind of just saw myself as a leader within my own projects mostly, kind of just organizing everything, leading the direction. But I wasn't as intentional about going beyond that scope.
Nice. I was in the same position that I'm in now. And for leadership, I saw myself, well, I think my ITLW coach kind of summed it up well when he described me as a reluctant leader, where I found myself in a space where I had some leadership skills, I was using them, but it wasn't necessarily something that I sought out. I'm happy to be in that space, though.
So I'm going to dive a little deeper into that with our next question. Like, what specifically motivated you to attend then? You know, was there a gap that you identified, or was there some sort of external pressure for you to think about that?
Yeah, there wasn't external pressure.
Yeah.
And like I said, I've been on campus for a long time, so I've been aware of ITLW for its entire existence. I don't know what changed. I think it was positive peer pressure. I had some conversations with various people across campus leading up to the application period last year, and it clicked. It was the right time. And I'm so glad that I did it.
Fantastic. Lauren, how about you?
And then for me, I've always been fascinated with observing leaders and learning about how they got to where they are now. And I find their stories really inspirational. So that was part of the reason. And I was also wanting to learn a little bit more about how to deal with like the political aspects of higher education and kind of navigating those, and learning more about specific situations and how leaders handle those.
So there are lots of fun aspects of leadership, but I want to start off with what was the most challenging part of the workshop, if you don't mind sharing, and why?
So for me, I would say the most challenging part of the workshop was the group project, which it was such a big part of it, but I think in a way it was challenging because it was it was also a real world application, because there were a lot of different people in the group who had different IT levels of experience, and then we picked a topic that I wasn't super familiar with, but then we all had to kind of learn how to meet in a way with there were some people who had a louder voice versus some quieter voices. So trying to make sure that everybody had an opportunity to get their ideas across. And then also after we did our presentation, I was reflecting back on the experience, and I thought, oh, maybe I should have been more vocal about respectfully disagreeing and saying like, oh, maybe we should go in this direction. So that's kind of what I learned from the group work experience.
That is so funny because the group project was the thing that popped into my head immediately as well. And my group was fantastic. We had great camaraderie. Everybody was working really hard, but it's very short deadlines for everything. And you have vacations that have been planned around those dates that are available. So it becomes really hard to hit all the marks and have everybody involved. But at least my group was able to fluidly move with that and figure out how to make it happen.
Since you both brought up the group project as one of the biggest challenges, how did you navigate that environment where none of you was designated the leader, and you had to kind of jump into this and deliver this thing when you all didn't have previous relationships to each other and no one was designated the leader? How did that work?
It was really challenging. That was something that I told my group, because I've never been in a group in school where everybody is super motivated and can be the leader. Usually, like, there's only one or two people in a group who will take the lead. And so it was interesting having a lot of leaders in the group trying to make decisions and trying to navigate that.
Yeah, I think we did have some quieter members in our group as well, and making space for everybody to have a voice, because that is important. It's something that I like. It's something that I like to do. I do like to do it. I'm not phrasing that well. I'm a really good listener. I think it's one of my greatest assets and skills that I have in the workplace. And I'm aware when voices aren't being equal in the space. And so sometimes that means specifically saying, like, Candice, you haven't mentioned how you feel about this, or whatever it might be, or just making enough space for people to talk.
So since the workshop, what's one place where you've taken something that you learned in the workshop that was new to you, and applied it in your workplace and like brought it into practical terms?
I don't know if it was completely new to me, but I think that I learned a greater depth of time management. And part of that had to do with really thinking about my time in a different way, and thinking about that breakdown of doing, managing, and leading, and trying to figure out, where am I mismanaging my time? Because I hadn't looked at it holistically in that way before. So I had a new way of looking at that, and I've done, I think, a much better job overall of recognizing where I might need to delegate more to get it off of my plate so that I can do more of what I should be doing.
So what shifted for you? Are you doing more leading, managing now and less doing? What's the...
Trying very hard to do less doing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really hard in our environment, especially if you have a smaller team.
Yeah.
Everyone sort of has to do all of those things at once. How about you, Lauren?
Oh yeah, I can think of a good example of that. One of my main takeaways from the workshop was that feedback is a gift. And so when I left the workshop, I developed a client feedback survey, and that was really helpful. Gave me a lot of good ideas about directions to go and kind of what I should focus on based on the feedback I got from that survey. And now I continue to try and find new ways to where I can get feedback as I'm working on new projects or with new groups.
So on the flip side, there are ideas that are presented at ITLW or at the workshop that are wonderful, and maybe they say conceptual. Are there times where you haven't been able to apply any of those things? And if so, what haven't you been able to apply that you've wanted to actually apply to your work environment that you haven't yet been able to do?
Chris, you just alluded to this, that we can be stretched very thin when you're on a small team. And I do work on a very small team. So I get a little envious when I'm in meetings with people at larger organizations and somebody says, oh, I do this. And they stop right after that one thing because they wear one hat. And then somebody else talks about what hat they wear. And I'm like, oh my God, that's, I wear all of those hats. So it's hard to figure out where those gray areas are. So I think that it makes it hard to do some of the things fully that we learn about in ITLW. If you don't have enough extra time in your day to fully utilize those tools.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up, Jen, because I think there's Candice and I can, like, when we're talking with our peers at the kind of the director level, we can sometimes get frustrated with some of them because they're not thinking at a strategic level. And but we have to realize that many of them have such small teams that they're living in a tactical level all the time, because they don't have a team to do all of that stuff for them. And so we have to be cognizant of the fact that not everybody lives in that same context. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Are there places where you still struggle to apply some of the concepts that we shared at ITLW?
I think for me is just having more opportunities to apply them in different groups, and I just maybe having like taking part in more committees and things like that, then I would have opportunity to kind of apply them more, but just trying to be more intentional and finding the time to apply them.
So have your interactions with senior leaders changed at all since you went through the program?
I don't think my interactions with senior leaders have changed dramatically. I have tried to be a little bit more clear and direct, but then I've also been more, I feel like I keep using the word intentional, been more intentional about sharing like different opportunities or expressing my interest in things that I want to do, and in order to like have growth and more opportunities. So
I think, well, things have changed, but that's not utilizing the skills. We've just had complete change in leadership at the iSchool. So it's rebuilding. And yeah.
How has that been for you as you've been going through that? Because when change happens above you, it can be really disruptive at your level or below. So like, how has that been for you?
It hasn't been easy because with new people in new leadership positions, they're getting their feet under them. And sometimes it can be very hard to get their time to have the conversations that need to be had. So that's been the biggest struggle.
What does being a leader mean to you now compared to what it meant before you went through the program?
I think it's funny that you mentioned using the word intentional because that's something that keeps coming to mind for me. And I think ITLW gave me a lot of skills that I'm able to look at and more intentionally apply them. And so I spend more time thinking about that. You know,
are there specific skills that you're looking at being intentional about?
Communication is probably the biggest one, and trying to cast as broad a net as possible. Like I've always tried to be as transparent about things as I could be, but I began to realize that there were times where I might have been doing a smaller audience than I needed to. And so taking time to figure out what the right audience is, get the word out there more about whatever it is. Knowledge is power.
And before ITLW, I kind of saw leadership as something that's more directly related to a title, but now I see it as everybody can be a leader and make an impact through having good communication, accountability, and supporting each other. I think that everyone now can kind of become a leader.
Jen, one of the things that you said, said you could be more intentional about things. You like learn these things. And my experience when I went through the program in 2013 and I was sitting in your seats, I kept having these moments of, oh, that's what I do. Right. I think some of the things that came to me naturally, some of the things that I just picked up over time, I could name it and understand why it worked. And then I found that you can be much more intentional about that after you know what it is and why it works, just rather than just doing it by the seat of your pants. So both of you, I think, still have roles where you have technical responsibilities and leadership responsibilities. So how do you balance that? We got into a little bit about what that lead manage do, but how do you kind of stay technically capable as well as sort of flexing your leadership muscles?
I'm trying to think about, as I mentioned before, how much can I delegate? How much more can I give to other people? And I'm not worried as much about keeping up those technical skills. I want to know how things work and everything, but it's letting go of knowing the finer details. So you were talking about being able to think strategically. It's hard to have space in your head to think strategically when you're also thinking about, okay, if we do this, these are the cascading issues that are going to go from there, and we need to fix this way and this that way, and thinking about all of that. So trying to figure out how to let other people figure that out, and hopefully they find it as exciting as I do, because I love that part of the process, but I need to let some of that go.
I think having a technical understanding is really important for leaders, and having a balance, because then they're able to better understand and communicate when they're in meetings and understand what their team does.
Since ITLW, what's one leadership habit that you've started and that's had measurable impact? So something that you started since ITLW and you're like, wow.
I think I mentioned communication. I think that's the one that I can look at the most. And
can you share like an example of like a specific example of how you've applied that communication that you've been working on?
I have one employee who's 100% remote, and being more intentional about communication that's not hallway driven. Recognizing when I've had a hallway conversation and that I need to bring it into the other world, the virtual world, to make certain that everybody's on the same page, and to do it in a way that everybody knows that they're on the same page, so that it's not just a different hallway conversation that is happening on Teams or email or whatever's happening there. I want everybody to be in the loop. And so that's been, I mean, it's something so small, but it feels revolutionary in some ways.
Thank you, Jen.
I think a big part of the workshop was I learned how important self-awareness is in leadership and reflection. And so I have been a lot more intentional about being self-aware and having more reflection after I start something new or do a project or leave a meeting. I ask myself afterwards, is there anything that I could have improved? Is there anything that I did well? So just being more aware and I think really helps.
You all are now, ITLW graduates. You're part of the community here. And we need to start looking. Now it's time for you to start thinking about paying it back or paying it forward or however you want to call that to our community. So what advice would you give somebody that's kind of early in their IT career, or in your case, a data career, who doesn't see themselves as a leader yet?
I would encourage them to learn as much as they can about their work, start building that trust and accountability with the different relationships that they have. And I also like to encourage new employees to say yes to new opportunities, even if it's something that might scare them. I think that it's really important to try that because that's how you grow. So
I think I'd tell people, I would tell people, and I do tell people, that you want to build a strong foundation now. Start building good habits, work with integrity from the get-go, and you'll be in a stronger place as you rise up because you'll have all of that in place. And yeah, I think that taking advantage of opportunities, like you're saying, is really huge.
Is there a common mistake that emerging leaders make that you've personally experienced? And if so, would you like to share?
I think I've seen several times where people get into a leadership position and they feel the need to make a mark right away. They want to have a win, and they don't always get the lay of the landscape before they do that. And so it can be a huge misstep, and it can drain trust in the team and cause damage to organizations. And I've seen that happen more than once.
I would agree with Jen that one of the big things that we learned in the workshop too is about culture and understanding a culture. So sometimes when new leaders come in, they will make sweeping changes. And we talked about changes in organizations. And I think it's really important to have a lot of conversations first and understand how to work within the culture.
If you think forward in your own careers and your own aspirations, what kind of a leader are you trying to be in the next 2 to 3 years? I think you both have things on the horizon that are very promising for both of you. So like 2 or 3 years from now, what do you want What kind of leader do you want to be?
I want to be more confident and more intentional in the things that I pursue. And I also want to continue learning. Recently, I've started managing a graduate student worker. And so I want to learn how I can better manage and support them. And so I think that is what I want to continue to grow in.
I like what I'm doing. I want to keep leaning into that and seeing how I can keep getting better. I don't mind being a reluctant leader and figuring out how I contribute best in that space, because every team needs different characteristics from everybody that's there. And I think that I bring something strong in that position.
I'm going to press you a little bit on the reluctant leader thing.
Okay.
Since this is Candid Conversations. So what exactly does that mean to you? Like you are leading.
Mm-hmm.
So what is that? What does the reluctant part really mean to you?
As I understand it, with how my coach was just like, oh, reluctant leader sort of thing, is Lauren, when you're talking, you have a plan. You're like, okay, I want to take these steps to get to this place, and she knows where she wants to go. And in my career, ultimately, I want to be happy in my job. That's always been my goal. I've never looked at something and said, okay, in 5 years, I want to have achieved this. I want this title. I want this goal. But I have learned a lot about myself along the way, including, hey, here's something I'm kind of good at. Let me do more of that. And so I'll just sort of craft my job and change it a little bit. I'll keep doing everything that I'm supposed to be doing, and I'll try to lean into those strengths. And so I have ended up in a leadership position, but it's not something that I strategically aimed for.
I think it does sound more intentional than you're giving it credit for.
It sounds very intentional.
Okay, if I reflect on it with the way that I just said it, yes. But
So is there one characteristic that you still feel is underdeveloped? And if so, what's that characteristic? And is it something that you feel like you need to work on?
For me, it's public speaking. So having opportunities, it's something that I've tried to push myself in doing more conference presentations, talking in meetings, and I've definitely developed it more since I've started at Gies, because I lead a lot more meetings and things like that. So just becoming more confident in doing that. One thing that I admire about leaders is their ability to communicate on the fly when they need to answer a question, and knowing kind of the right things to say. So kind of just learning how to get there.
Slightly off topic from the question, but Lauren and I in ITLW were in a peer coaching group with one other person, and we still get together regularly and catch up, peer coach, talk about different things. And the last time that we met, one of the things that I said, because you just kind of reminded me of it with what you're doing, is over the past few years, I've been intentionally doing things that are outside of my comfort zone. And the thing that I realized recently is that in doing so, my comfort zone has gotten bigger and bigger. And so the public speaking, anything like that, I'm like, okay, I'm doing things and now they don't bother me anymore. Let me learn this new skill that I used to think I didn't have, or whatever it is.
Yes. And one of the things that I really appreciate about our peer coaching group is we share opportunities and things that we hear about. So that kind of just expands our horizons a little bit more about things that are going on campus that we can do.
Yeah.
Really glad to hear you both talking about sort of intentionally putting yourself in those situations where you're uncomfortable.
Yes.
Because so many people feel that confidence is ingrained in somebody, that they're born with it. That's like absolutely not the case. Like confidence is the result of practice.
Yeah.
Like that's it. You know, maybe some people are a little bit more naturally confident than others, but truly confident people have put themselves through the test and they've passed the test, and then they become confident with it.
Yeah. That was part of my application for ITLW, was wanting to improve my self-confidence, and that I thought that some of that training would do. But on the flip side of that, I've had people tell me like, oh, you're so confident. And I just kind of look at them like, what?
The same thing has happened to me where people are like, oh, you do a really good job leading meetings and things like that, where somebody else might see that you're good at something, but then you might not necessarily realize it yourself.
So if we were to have this conversation a year from now, we bring you back into the studio. How do you all want to be different? How do you, Jen, you seem to like be averse to the idea of saying, I want to accomplish this. But a year from now, what do you want to have accomplished?
I think what I want to accomplish is, if I were to come back in a year, I'd want to be able to say, I can't believe I said I needed to work on my self-confidence in my ITLW application. Like, what was I thinking? Look at everything I can do. So I think that's what I would want.
Yeah, and I think for me, in a year or two, I really want to take a lot of the feedback that I got and work on improving the processes, and then also continuing to learn about the management role, the management responsibilities. And I've already learned since I first started managing someone, I learned, maybe I should be more explicit and say X, Y, and Z like the next time around, so that I just think that there's so much that you can learn through managing someone.
What questions do you have for us about our leadership or our experiences?
Time to flip the table. You can
Not
ask us whatever. Yeah, not literally flip the table, but flip the responsibilities here in the podcast. Give you a chance to ask us questions.
So, what piece of advice or leadership skill did you wish that you had earlier in your career?
So, if I had a piece of advice that I would tell younger Candice, what would I tell younger Candice? So, I usually say, Candice, don't try to please everybody. It's not about being liked. Leadership is not about being liked, even though you love to be liked. It's more about being approachable. It's more about being consistent, fair, and essentially transparent. So that's more what it's about versus having everybody like you. So that's the piece of advice I would tell everyone. You're not going to please everyone. Not everyone's going to be your friend. Just get over that and just be fair and consistent. It will help you with your leadership journey.
I think my answer to that is adjacent to Candice's answer. And it's basically, you don't have to be good at everything, right? Because I think the things where I have made the biggest mistakes and I've probably turned off more people is when I'm not good at something, yet I insist I'm good at something. And that doesn't create space for others to come in and collaborate with you. It makes you, frankly, kind of obnoxious because you're playing from insecurity. And it's okay to not be good at everything and to admit that publicly and sort of have that vulnerability as a leader. I can't tell you, like, once that switch turned for me, I can't tell you how different of a leader I became and how accessible I became as a leader. And I think that was sort of the magic switch for me, from being someone who's very focused on myself to being focused on really being inclusive with others.
I'm curious if ITLW had an extra hour, an extra day, what would you prioritize? Like, what do you think every year where you're like, oh, I wish we could delve into this?
That's a good question.
So we've changed the content and we massage the content often, but there have been pieces that we've taken in and out. And the piece that left, I think around day 2, was like self-care and the component of like, when things get very stressful. And I think about this when I was thinking about my keynote a while back about burnout. And when I was thinking about that burnout speech, I was like, oh, these are all the things I used to talk about in ITLW. And I just like plopped that into the keynote speech. And I was just like, oh, we should probably put that back in there. Even though I thought it was like obvious that people should do those best practices, I was just like, we should sprinkle some of that back in there.
Yeah, because you're right. Like the way the curriculum sits right now, there's not a lot about taking care of yourself as a leader. And that is so incredibly important. If we don't do that, we are no good for anybody else, right? It's the put your oxygen mask on first kind of thing. So
briefly we say self-awareness. Okay, now let's keep it up.
And I would add to that, and I think this is again related, is we talk about emotional intelligence, and there's the 4 quadrants of emotional intelligence: self-awareness, self-management, relational awareness and relationship management. I don't think we do great service to self-management. We talk about self-awareness and kind of knowing yourself, but that what do you do with that information after you're self-aware? Like self-awareness isn't important unless you then put it into practice as self-management. And we don't do a ton. We do some time management things. We do that sort of thing, but we don't really talk about how do you change yourself so you're interacting with people differently and that sort of thing. So I think that's where I would. That's a great question. I think if you had all of the facilitators sitting around in a room, you'd probably get a different answer from every single one of them. But that's a great question. I might bring that up at our next governance meeting.
That would be exciting to hear what everybody has to say about that.
Yeah.
So what experiences shaped you into the leader that you are?
I think I'll go ahead and start.
Yeah, go ahead.
Making mistakes has shaped me into the leader that I am. Making huge mistakes. Also navigating stress outside of work, like my personal life and big work experiences, while navigating and moving up in my career at the same time has shaped me into the leader that I am. So being able to juggle, I've talked about my juggle metaphor multiple times, being able to juggle all those things and still advance in my career has shaped me into the leader that I am. So
I think there's so many points along my career where I can point to and go, that was pivotal. That like changed me.
yes,
I've talked about a lot of them on this podcast already, so I'm trying to come up with something that's a little more.
When was the last time you cried at work, Chris?
Last week, actually.
There you go.
Yeah, last week. There. So Candice asked me that question because she knows I like to cry at the drop of a hat. So it's not unusual, but no, I think it is the moments where we have to make really difficult decisions around people, right? And affecting it, whether it's we choose one person over another for an opportunity, or there's a performance management issue that we have to deal with. When you realize someone is not the right fit for this organization, and you have to help them see that and understand that and find something else for them to do where they can fit. Right. I'm convinced most people that aren't a good fit here are a good fit somewhere else. Right. And it's just navigating that process. That's where it really, that's where the rubber hits the road as a leader, I think. And some of that is management, but I think most of that is leadership and bringing human compassion to those moments all the time. That's what matters.
Yeah. I like to plus one that because that's when I've had to have those conversations that are very difficult and challenging. It's taught me resilience. It's taught me how to have clear communication, because you can be kind with your words and still fire people. I mean, you can. There's lots of things that happen. It's not a laughable time, but it's teaches you a lot of accountability. So that's a lot.
And I think the other thing is, and we at Gies, I think I don't know where we hit this point, but we hit a tipping point of size where it is virtually impossible for everybody to be getting along. And also to be equally doling out opportunity to everybody, because there's not enough opportunity for everybody. And to be making those choices that affect people that way, and balancing when you have interpersonal conflict on your teams, when you make a decision as a leader, that is almost always going to come across as you picked that person over this person. You can hardly ever navigate around that particular issue. And I think the best leaders are the ones that can come out of those situations with as many people as possible feeling like they were heard and given the best chance, even if they didn't get their way. So those are defining moments, I think, because if you don't do that well as a leader, that's when the culture in your organization just goes to hell, frankly. If you're not doing that well.
Yeah, you're going to lose trust.
Yeah.
This isn't a leadership question, but both of you seem to really enjoy where you are and what you're doing in your roles right now. if you weren't here, if you weren't at the University of Illinois, you weren't in leadership and IT, where would you be? Where do you think you would be?
I wasn't at the University of Illinois. Why would I not be at the University of
know.
Illinois?
I know,
This is the best place on earth. Yeah.
I love higher education. Speaking as a person who's getting a doctorate. Okay. Let's see. I would have to be doing something that involves communicating with people because I love communication is one of my strengths. I love talking to people, so I would definitely do that. I would like to do something that involves leadership in a sense of making sure that I'm making an impact, but also allowing people to see the best in themselves. So bringing out the best in individuals, that's something that I would have to do. So it would probably align with teaching, not necessarily administration. So some type of, if it's not consultant work, teaching work, I do a lot of guest speaking and things of that nature that has to do with leadership. So it would probably be, I would make my own consultant, Solomon-Strutz Industries, and we go out and do leadership workshops all over the place. And that's what I would probably be doing. Yeah.
I'd probably be working for Candice.
I think we all want to work for Candice in this company.
No, I think for me, it's about connection and growth.
Mm-hmm.
Like those are the things that really like speak to me. And so it'd have to be something where I am like connecting with other people all of the time. That's what drives me. That's what wakes me up in the morning. But I also really, really enjoy helping people grow. Like that is the most rewarding part about this job is helping people grow and, find opportunities for themselves and feel accomplished in their lives, right? That's incredibly important to me. Now, if I could, I have like truly fallen in love with this medium. Like I love podcasting. I have this podcast with Candice, and I have another podcast that's a personal podcast. I'm thinking about possibly starting a third one. If I could make a living doing podcasting and having real conversations with people that are meaningful conversations, I would give all this up in a heartbeat because I think it's such a powerful medium to get people together and have real conversations. Now they have to be real. Like I'm not going to just sit there and talk about nothing. Like there are a lot of podcasts just talk about nothing, but to have real meaningful conversations with people that then have a ripple effect out to other people, like just chef's kiss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's obvious why the two of you are doing this together. If I think about the answers that both of you just gave.
Yeah.
So you two spoke to this a little bit, but how do you handle like those conversations when you have to fire someone or have a difficult conversation? How did you learn to navigate those conversations? Did you go to somebody and ask for advice about how to approach it, or?
So you learn along the way, but one of the first things that I do is I definitely take a breath. I take that very literally now because I only have one lung. I take a breath and I pause because I'm a very fast talker. And so if I don't want to react on emotion a lot, I want to make sure that I listen to all viewpoints when that's happening. And so me taking that breath and being able to reflect on what's happening allows me to now make sure that I'm listening to everyone, not just like, this is exactly what I'm going to do. And because I can always fire off that first thing that comes to mind because impromptu speaking is what I do. I'm like, I'm ready to go. I don't need to think. But when I have to have those crucial conversations, I have to take a breath. And so it's like, Candice, pause, give your time to reflect. And even though you want to be timely with it, I want to get it as right as possible. It's never always going to be perfect because I can't do that, but I do want to take time to do that. And so I learned along the way by, again, making some mistakes, but that's how I deal with it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, it's experience. Like it's like to have confidence in having a conversation like that. It helps to have done it before. It's practice, right? Confidence is practice. I will say that if it's a difficult conversation with an employee, my first go-to is always talk to HR first and just say, here's the situation. Here's what we're dealing with. Give me the guardrails because I don't want to step outside the guardrails. And then within the guardrails, I'm the one that has to have that conversation. And most people don't know this about me, but when I became the IT director for Illinois Extension back in 2012, before I came to Gies, the short story is there were major budget cuts to Extension. Extension had given every single employee, or virtually every single employee, 95% of the organization, T contracts, which basically meant at this date, you no longer have a job. Now we're going to redesign the organization, and all of you can apply for those new positions. So they essentially started over with the organization because of budget cuts. They had to cut about 150 positions or something like that. So like bloodbath. Mm-hmm. I became the IT director after the entire IT team had been given their T contracts. And I had to redesign the IT organization and say, okay, now you all have to reapply for your jobs. There were 10 people. By the time I took over, only 4 remained because all the rest of them saw the writing on the wall and went and got other jobs. The 4 that were remaining, I only rehired 2 of them. And so my first step out of the door as the leader of that organization was to tell 50% of the remaining people they no longer had jobs.
I just realized how much overlap some of our roles had to do at this campus, because I remember when I took the interim role over at Fine Applied Arts and they said, hey, by the way, we need you to come over here and can you make all this IT one and then tell us who we need to fire and also tell us and I was just like, what? They were like, but don't tell them that you're doing that. I was like, what? They're like, you're going to be here for 3 months and please make everybody happy, but also tell me who we need to fire. And then you can disappear. Wow. Not off campus, but you don't have to be here anymore. Hire a new person to be the director. And I was like, what? They're like, yeah, so go in and evaluate everybody's job. Should you work here? Should you not work here? And then tell me how the organization should look after you leave.
So I told 2 15-year employees who were a couple of years away from retirement that they no longer had jobs.
Yeah. They were like,
that is by far the hardest thing in this job, by far.
Yeah, I would not want to have that conversation.
Yeah, it's really difficult.
Especially when you're still on campus with these people.
At the university, we don't have that conversation very often because it's really, really hard to actually get to that point. Because employees have a lot of chances. This is in the private sector. In the private sector, somebody can look at you the wrong way and you can fire them. There's no, there's really no guardrails. We don't have that here. And so we have to be really intentional about getting to that place. And it's a really difficult, it's the worst part of the job. It's the hardest part of the job and the worst part of the job. You never want to actually get there.
Wow.
Any additional questions for us before we wrap up?
Oh, so for our viewers and listeners, if you can tell me in the comments how many times intentionally was shared, and if you tell me, you might get a special prize. Just go ahead.
I think should be. I think the title should be "Being Intentional."
That's right. I think maybe IT leadership workshop should be intentional. Intentional. What's the T going to stand for now instead of information technology? It's
we can ask.
Yeah,
we can ask AI.
Yeah, we'll have to come up with a new name for the program. But I think that there's an importance to that, though. I mean, because everything about this program, everything about leadership, if you're not doing it intentionally, you're not doing it well. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing maybe that we need to sort of take out of this conversation. Yeah. So thank you both for joining us. This is a great conversation. It's the first time we've had ITLW alums on the show.
Thank you.
We've been really focused on maybe senior leaders at the university, and we just wanted to have a conversation with some people that are sort of in the throes of growing as a leader and maybe aren't at that place where they want to be and are still kind of going along that journey. So it's great having a conversation with both of you. Thank you, Lauren and Jen, for joining us today.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Yep.